I want to invite us to begin to regather after the many table conversations that are happening, which is really, really wonderful. This is one of the things that I love about these Thursday gatherings is it gives us a chance to be together in person, because many of our studies happen online in chat boxes on Zoom, and so there's something to be said for gathering together in the community. Have some good news for you. Rick Blackie came in today. Many of you know that Cynthia had a recent knee replacement surgery and has had some setbacks in the surgery and so forth. But we reached out. We have an annual picnic, typically in July, and typically we order up the hottest day of the year for that picnic.
You're the cook. Let's do what you're doing.
But anyway, you know, Rick and Cynthia are going to again host the last Wednesday in July. We'll send something out with a rain date of the Thursday. So we'll send something out to the group. We gather at their house. Hamburgers and hot dogs are provided. We bring the stuff around it and so forth. And if Rick and Cynthia in need of help, I said there's plenty of help to go around to make this happen, so Cynthia doesn't have to feel like, oh, you know, there. But anyway, so thank you. Thank you for hosting this annual event, which is really wonderful. So I want to thank you all again for coming to our last Gooning Lunch for this season of the year, and then we'll begin up again in September. And I want to begin with a simple statement, and that is that Pride Month matters. Pride Month matters for a variety of reasons, but for me specifically, Pride Month matters because the LGBTQIA+ community and individuals within the community, I start off with the theological statement, are beloved children of God. Go back to Genesis. All human beings are created in God's image. That's a profound theological statement. And so, this community, these people, are not projects, not problems, not political issues, not culture war talking points. People. People. Human beings. People created in the image of God. People with families, dreams, gifts, struggles, joys, and hopes. People whose lives are of sacred worth. And so for me, Pride Month isn't simply about politics. For me, it's about human dignity. It's about whether people can live honestly and safely. It's about whether people know they belong And as a Christian, I believe belonging is at the heart of the gospel. Belonging is at the heart of the gospel. Why does pride exist? Well, if LGBTQIA plus people had always been treated with dignity and equality, there wouldn't be a need for Pride Month. There wouldn't be a need for pride parades. There would be no need for rainbow flags. There would be no need for public celebrations of visibility. Pride exists because exclusion exists. Pride exists because people have lost jobs because of who they are. Pride exists because young people have been bullied. Pride exists because families have rejected their own children. Pride exists because churches have sometimes communicated that God's love had conditions attached to it. Pride exists because many LGBTQIA plus folk grew up hearing that they were somehow less worthy, less faithful, less loved. And pride responds by saying, we are here. We matter. We belong. And for me, that is hope. The other thing I want to say is one of the strengths of what I would call progressive Christianity is that it insists on honesty. And honesty requires us to acknowledge that the church, the Christian community, has not always been a safe place for LGBTQIA plus people. Many people sitting in churches today carry scars from religious communities. Some people were told they could not serve. Some people were told they could not marry. Some were told they could never be pastors. Some were told that who they were made them unacceptable to God. The truth is that churches have often inflicted wounds in the name of faith. And healing begins when we stop pretending otherwise. The gospel sometimes calls us to confession, not because confession produces shame, but because confession opens the door for transformation. Let's talk about the United Methodist Church's long struggle. For those of us who grew up in the United Methodist Church, we know this story very, very well. For more than 50 years, our denomination has argued over full inclusion. In the early 70s, I believe it was 72, the General Church voted to put in the discipline for the first time, it had never been there before, that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. And then voted that United Methodist pastors could not officiate at same-sex weddings. At that time in the nation, we didn't have that either, but it was put into the discipline. And not only that, one could not be a practicing homosexual and serve in the church as a pastor in the church. And since that time, every general conference, we debated and argued and upheld those decisions. Imagine that. Imagine showing up every Sunday to worship and hearing people argue about whether you should be fully included. Imagine wondering if your family belongs. Imagine wondering if your relationship is valued. Imagine hearing church leaders describe your life as incompatible. That was the reality for many, many people. And while we often talked about policies, legislation, and general conference votes, real human beings were carrying the weight of those decisions. Young people, parents, pastors, lay people, faithful Christians, people whom God loves. Let's talk about another reality. Over the last 4 years, things have changed. One is, because General Conference was canceled during COVID, the more conservative branches of the United Methodist Church began what is known as a disaffiliation process. A movement to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church. And I'm going to be perfectly blunt on this one. They might have talked about theology and church leadership and all sorts of other reasons for disaffiliating, but let's be honest. It was about LGBTQIA+ inclusion. That's what it was about. It's sort of like saying the Civil War was fought simply over states' rights and not slavery. Some people say that. Some people say that. Yes, there were conversations about theology, authority, and governance, but at its heart, disagreement centered on the LGBTQIA+ community and whether they could be fully included in the life of the church. Now, I know that faithful people and faithful Christians came to different conclusions. I respect that sincere people can disagree, but disagreement doesn't eliminate consequences. This was deeply personal for many, many people. Many people heard the painful message, we would rather leave the denomination than fully welcome you. I believe that inclusion is a gospel issue. I see it as a gospel issue. Because if you look at the Gospels and if you look at Jesus' life, ministry, and message, Jesus is constantly and consistently moving toward people who were excluded. Again and again, he crossed boundaries. Religious boundaries, social boundaries, cultural boundaries, gender boundaries, ethnic boundaries. And whenever people tried to draw lines around who belonged, what Jesus seemed to be determined to do is to step across those lines. For example, the religious leaders continually asked, why is Jesus eating with those people? Why is Jesus talking with those people? Why is he welcoming those people? And what Jesus continually does is continually expands the circle. Makes it wider and wider and wider. In other words, the gospel is not a story about protecting boundaries. It's a story about expanding belonging. We're in a movement or a time of what's known as Christian nationalism. And I believe pride matters in this moment as well. We live in a time when Christian nationalism is growing. But I also have said in the past that Christian nationalism to me is not Christianity. Christian nationalism is the belief that America should be defined by a particular version of Christianity and that political power can and should be used to preserve and enforce that vision. And it wraps itself in Christian language. It uses Christian symbols. It quotes Scripture. But it also completely misunderstands the gospel. Jesus never told anyone to dominate society. He never told us to seize political power. He never called us to create a Christian nation. What he called us to do was to love our neighbors, to welcome strangers, to care for the vulnerable, to serve rather than rule, to wash feet rather than seek power. In other words, the kingdom of God and Christian nationalism are not the same thing. One is rooted in love, the other is rooted in fear. And Christian nationalism thrives on that fear. Fear of social change, fear of diversity, fear of people who are different, fear of losing cultural influence, fear of losing power. But Scripture repeatedly tells us, don't be afraid. In 1 John, for instance, we hear the words, perfect love casts out fear. And whenever fear is the driving force of our theology, we should be cautious because fear narrows the circle. Love expands the circle. I share Christian nationalism in this moment because I believe that it creates insiders and outsiders. It tells us who should belong. And once we start trying and deciding who belongs, somebody inevitably gets excluded. Historically, it has been immigrants, religious minorities, people of color, women, LGBTQ plus people. Those who challenge the dominant narrative. The Apostle Paul said, "There is no longer Jew or Greek, slave or free, male and female, for all of you are one in Christ Jesus." For Paul, he wasn't erasing differences. What he was doing was dismantling hierarchies. He was saying that no category of human being is closer to God than another. The other thing I want to say is that pride is about more than tolerance. I'll be honest with you, one of my least favorite words is the word tolerate. I don't want to be tolerated. My guess is that many of you do not want to be tolerated. Tolerance says, "I'll put up with you." Is that any way to form a relationship? What I see in the gospel is something deeper. Belonging, celebration, community, mutuality. Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis talks about building the beloved community. And she says that a community where diversity is not merely accepted, diversity is embraced. Community where difference is not feared, difference is celebrated. Where people are not simply allowed to exist, but are invited to flourish. And she says that that should be the faith community's goal. And so what does being an ally look like? First, it's not about being perfect. Being an ally means being willing to act. It also means listening, learning, growing, speaking up when people are targeted, refusing to participate in dehumanizing language, creating safer spaces, making room at the table, and perhaps most importantly, recognizing that silence is not neutral. When people are harmed, silence protects the harm. When people are excluded, silence protects the exclusion. And I believe that justice moves forward because ordinary people decide to act and care. Now let me in on my own theology. I believe that God is always calling us toward greater love, toward greater justice, toward greater compassion. I also believe that the future is not predetermined. In other words, I believe we help create it. That's why I struggle with the word God's plan. I struggle with that. Because I believe that every choice matters, every act of courage matters, every act of welcome matters, every act of justice matters. For example, one of the things that when I was appointed to this congregation, this will be my 13th year. I was just thinking, going into my 13th year in July for this particular congregation. This congregation had voted to become a reconciling congregation long before that, I believe 1992.
1992. I was going to ask you to explain what it meant to be the procedure to be a reconciling congregation, which is why we have pride flags in the front yard.
The procedure, and what they did is not simply vote full inclusion, but were required to do a study, a theological study, community study, and open it up to the entire congregation. And at the end of that process, which is a long process, it's not just let's vote to become a reconciling congregation.
Months.
It was months, if not a full year, that the church undertook this process, and then at the end of the process voted to become a reconciling congregation, which meant that in its mission vision statement would include the statement centered around full inclusivity when it came to the LGBTQIA plus community. And it's written right there. Right there. Anyway, when I arrived here 12 to 13 years ago, Kay was in the office. She was the treasurer at the time. And she knew where I stood on things. And I said, when's the last time you did a reconciling ministry Sunday? She said, when Dick Hibbert was here. I'm like, but that's the pastor who was here when you voted to become a reconciling congregation. And so we immediately started advocating and celebrating Reconciling Ministry Sunday that year. In other words, the church had been silent. This church had been silent around that, even though there was a statement there. So, and part of it was pastoral leadership.
It's hard to fight
Yeah,
leadership.
exactly. And so, we've done that. This month we're going to, talking about Ally, there's a group of people working on a table for Pride down at downtown from this congregation. That's being an ally. We've had numerous studies over the years on human sexuality and theology. I did a book study a couple of years ago the book was entitled Queer Virtue. And it's how the LGBTQIA plus can transform the church, the community can transform the church. It means advocating. Advocating for children who are bullied. As I said a few moments ago, dehumanizing language. Having the courage when someone says something that is offensive to call that person out on it. Not attack the person, but say, I will not tolerate this kind of language. One of the things I pride myself on also is inclusive language when it comes to God language and when it comes to human language as well. One of the things I'm learning how to say is no longer brothers and sisters in Christ. Why not say siblings in Christ? I heard a lot of that at annual conference this year, which was wonderful. But again, patriarchal language, those kinds of things are important there. I work hard on it, for example, on Sunday mornings with our bulletins and the liturgy. I've changed up the language of communion liturgy to be inclusive and to recognize that. So those are, you think, that's just words. but it's more than words as well. It's how do we create that welcoming community. And so being an ally can take many forms. It's not only marching. Marching is important, but it's also about paying attention. Paying attention. I guess I close by my talk, and then I'm going to open it up for conversation. That I believe that Pride Month still matters. Matters for the church, matters for our community, matters for our nation. And the reason I believe that is that there's still exclusion. There's still bullying. There's still trauma. Deep trauma. And I believe that this community and all faith communities should step up and not be silent. I did sense, and then I'm going to open it up for conversation. What I found fascinating, I went to what's known as Upper New York Annual Conference, which is our conference's annual gathering of clergy and laity. Sandy was there, Kay was there as well. And I do believe that the United Methodist Church is in a new day. My struggle at annual conference is that we're not having serious enough conversations around what that new day practically looks like. It's great to share all the words and that kind of thing, but I really don't think there's been enough done around the trauma that has been created by that language for 50 years. 50 years. I can give you a good practical example. It's not around human sexuality, but at this annual conference this year, we had 2 opportunities to do some things, and both fell flat. Really badly flat. In fact, it was almost offensive. One was, many of you are aware that the church, the United Methodist Church was caught up in the child sexual abuse scandals, particularly around BSA and so forth. And it's all settled, all of that's been run through the courts and settled. And so at annual conference this year, we had a service of apology, if you will, a confessional service. First of all, what was offensive about it was only 50 minutes long. And secondly, the hymn that was chosen to end the service was written by a child sexual predator.
Oh, jeez.
And the trauma that created, was awful. And some got up and said, we didn't know about this. Well, it was in the General Board of Discipleship. It had been publicized that this person, his name's David Haas, Haas, is a known predator. That was one thing. So that was one thing that we fell short again. The second thing that we fell short on was, this is the 70th year of women's ordination. in the United Methodist Church.
And we had
70th year of women's ordination. You would have thought that that would have been something to celebrate, right? They showed a 2-minute video, the entire conference.
And let's publicize
Yeah.
the director of that video, Miss Allison Arnold,
Yeah,
sitting at our table.
but that was it. That was it. Your video. You know, I'm not criticizing the video. Please, it was a beautiful video.
was great.
But that's all that was done. And all I saw was the anger from my colleagues who were female. They came with their red shoes and red sneakers. That's a symbol of the women's ordination and Georgia Harkness. You know, they all wore the red shoes for ordination. They were ready to celebrate.
Started out of Derek Gila.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, you know, how does that relate to Pride Month? To me, it relates because the church still falls short. Faith communities still fall short.
It's still sweeping
So I-
other under the rug.
It's still sweeping the other under the marginalized
Yeah.
ones under the rug. You know. Anyway, I opened up for conversation. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I was just, my observation is that over the last 20, 25 years especially, I think society as a whole has made really noticeable progress with recognizing LGBT people. I mean, it's no longer unusual to see TV commentators, politicians, athletes who come out and admit to their sexuality and are basically accepted in society at large. It seems to me that it's the church that is one of the most conservative.
Has been.
bastions of-
Yeah.
And certainly some denominations more than others.
Yep.
And I sort of wonder why that is, and I'm just thinking that, you know, what you said about love and fear, it seems like the church, those denominations that are more, or less accepting of gays are more fearful of something. And I just wonder, you know, what that fear is.
A good question, and
Yeah.
I think part of it is what my observation is that, and it goes back to Christian nationalism in many ways for me, and that is that there's a small there's a 20 to 30% minority that wants to hold on to power at all costs, and it's in the church as well as in our politics. We see it now, and what happens is that those holding on to power means blaming marginalized communities. That's one. I mean, I think immigration, human sexuality, racism are all tied together.
Women in the church.
Women in the church
Gender
are all
Great
tied
deal
together.
of fear
Yep.
on the level. It's just another decision from the Southern Baptists that
That's right.
people will not recognize churches who are pastored by women.
That's right. Yep. Pastored by women. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So I think it's a small, again, the changing demographics of the country, changing demographics of the community. The hard part is what happened prior to the disaffiliations is that many United Methodist clergy and many United Methodist members who were part of the reconciling movement in the United Methodist Church, they got so fed up and they left. After they tired of fighting. Some of my most amazing colleagues just said, "I'm done. I'm
Wonderful
done."
pastors. We
Wonderful
lost so many
pastors.
wonderful pastors.
You know, so again, because of that. Go ahead, Anna.
Well, control through fear is easier than leadership
Mm-hmm.
by love. So being an authoritarian is simple. It's
Yeah.
easy. You force it. These people have been raised on the Dobson method.
Yeah.
And, you know, so it's all intertwined control and fear. And these are the fire and brimstone type,
Yeah.
as opposed to you have to have love and patience and work at it. And it's work to lead versus
Mm-hmm.
control.
Yeah,
Keep
exactly.
people scared. And it's easy. Give me your money, or
That's right.
you know,
Yeah.
your money or your eternal soul. Like
Yeah.
it's there's profit
Mhm.
motive to that too.
Exactly. And what the church does is the church historically has gone to the three, what they call the three clobber passages, the entire Bible. You know, Jesus never once talked about sexuality. But those conservative churches go to the Leviticus, for one, Sodom and Gomorrah, which is a complete misreading of that story, complete misreading of the story, you know, and then not even authentic Paul, but a Pauline letter that was attributed to Paul, but Paul didn't write it. You know, Paul didn't even write it, and it was the submitting passages for women. You know, no women in leadership, but Paul had many women in leadership, but also in around human sexuality. And so you take that whole entire, Bill and I were talking about it, you take that whole book and use three passages out
And
of
there's
context.
subparts of whole passages.
Exactly.
The Leviticus piece is amidst the purity codes that really speak to sanitation and lack of refrigeration, da 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 da. But the only thing we want to talk about is man should not lie with a man as he lies with a woman.
Yep.
And some
Exactly.
translations say it's more with what it's about imbalance of
Pederasty was
power.
a big
Yes.
thing.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
this is about taking advantage, not about their gender.
Yeah, exactly. Other comments? What did you hear from others? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking, agreeing with what you were talking about, but I obtained the first-hand experience of Christian nationalism. I was on the honor flight months ago, and I ended up, one of the venues that I stopped at was the Lincoln Memorial. And I was there with my son, and the Lincoln Memorial had these gigantic speakers that were set up on both sides, full volume. It was rap and hip hop, and it was Christian rap and hip hop. And it was this really annoying, you couldn't walk by, you had to put your fingers in your ears, it was so loud. My son said, I wish I had some clippers that would cut the lines in the ear, it was so bad. And the other thing I noticed about that was, in between the hip hop, it was all pro-Trump stuff about how he is dealing with people that are ungrateful and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And finally, we decided that, you know, we couldn't stay there any longer. But I also noticed a lot of booths, religious booths, all around the Lincoln Memorial. It was really sacrilegious to Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
I think that was the weekend that Trump had the White House. I think that's why they were all there that weekend. There was that prayer rally at the
Yeah,
White House.
that was
I think that's why.
his 250th thing.
Is it the National Prayer Breakfast?
No, that was dedication 250,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
which was a bunch of bullshit. Excuse my language,
That's
but
okay.
And the flip side is I was in Nova Scotia over the weekend, and I was able to attend the Canadian Coast Guard Academy graduation. And what was so interesting is Canada has taken, has intentionally made lots of movement toward reparation and reconciliation to Indigenous people.
Yes.
And we were able to tour the newest ship of the fleet. And there was artwork at every turn that was in Indigenous flavor. At the graduation as well as the dinner, we had Indigenous performances and music and speakers. And it was it just felt so hopeful that a country can actually acknowledge and have take responsibility for messing up in the earlier years. And we're far from that, but it gives me hope.
Yeah. It's a lot of hard work. I'm watching right now a documentary series on the Cold War, for instance, and it's things that I heard and was listening to completely surprised me. How as a nation we struggle with honesty on interpreting our history. We struggle with honesty. We have in our history the way in which we treated Indigenous folk.
We screwed up too.
We screwed up too. We have Japanese internment camps. Marginalized communities, black communities, are America's original sin, slavery. We still have not. What's that?
None of them are gone.
None of them are gone. Exactly. Go ahead, Norman.
We have internment camps now.
Yes, exactly.
And they're building more and more of them. We're going back to the Jim Crow era. So none of this has disappeared by any means. In fact, it feels like we're going backwards.
And on top of that, I was watching the news this week, last night or the night before, where they were doing a program on the World Cup. And what they were saying is Holman and Mullins have ramped up ice around the World Cup to arrest. Well, look what happened to the referee from Somalia. Look what they've done to the Iranian soccer team.
The Moroccan team?
What's that?
The Moroccan team.
The Moroccan team. So again, it hasn't gone away. In fact, I would say under this current administration, it's out in front.
Yeah.
I mean,
Not even
yes.
Burn the flag in Chicago.
What's
Burn
that?
the cross in Chicago.
One of the things I noticed also when I was in DC is they had many small booths set up with Bibles and trinkets and crosses on beads and stuff like that. And what I noticed, the people that were running these booths, they were very young kids. So they were already starting at a young age, these children. And a lot of them looked like they were 12, 13, 14, running these booths and selling these things. And another thing I noticed, there were a lot of little black kids like that. Doing these things.
And the thing about it is, when we talk about political power, I'm not as, Annie, you could probably speak to it better than I can because I'm a little too old to speak to it now, being just having turned 60. But what's happened is the Christian nationalism and those who masterful at media, podcasting, and so forth. That's where they're getting their news.
Turning Point USA.
Turning Point US. Exactly.
White supremacist reporting organization via Christian nationalism.
Exactly.
Charlie Kirk had an audience, but, he's been immortalized by his death.
And they're trying to get Turning Point USA into all of our schools, middle schools and high
Mhm.
schools. hosting events. They hosted an event just at Beacontown Firehouse.
I read that.
Yeah, so,
All over the place, but they're trying to get a chapter in every single school
yeah.
to recruit our kids.
Oh my gosh.
And this gets back to Christianity. If you look at the current political support, he has not lost the evangelical community
Right.
at all. 80 to 85% of the evangelical community around Turning Point and others support it. I'll give you the statistics that floored me. 72% of United Methodists in the last presidential election voted.
Oh,
Yes, 72% of United Methodists. Now, and this is after disaffiliation. So, surprises?
And it's the denomination that had the lowest percentage of voters of
Exactly.
all the Protestant denominations.
UCC Episcopal were 30. 35%.
I think that's because there are so many Methodist congregations, like every little town I go through in the North Country, and I was raised Catholic, so this is all like a revelation to me. Every town I go to, no matter how small, has a Methodist congregation.
Yes.
So is it because there is a lot of Methodism in rural communities which tend to be more conservative?
I think it has to do with that. I also think it has to do with education. You know?
because there's there's a shortage of pastors,
Yes,
as there is a shortage of money for local churches to have full-time pastors who would be guaranteed appointed, elders. So it comes down to education, as you said. They're not necessarily United Methodists in theory and in practice.
And again, I'm not trying to sound like an educational elitist. I don't want to be sounding in that way. But denominations that attract folk with a college degree, the three top ones are Unitarian Universalists, Episcopalians, and UCC, United Congregational. Those are the ones that, if you look at educational level, people tend, if they're going to join a church, they tend to go in that direction. Methodists are much lower in educational level, interestingly enough. So I think it has to do, think about human sexuality. Part of it is a learning process, Part of it is a learning process.
So,
as well.
that
Go ahead,
means
Dave.
that those that tend to go with Christian nationalism are morons?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying, I'm trying to be.
Stop that camera.
From a purely statistical standpoint, that those that lean most conservative tend to rank lower on literacy,
That's right. Thank you.
education, and have a higher fear sensitivity.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
I wanted to add on that.
I'll have you come up here on September. That'd be fun.
From the Christian nationalists, you mentioned honor flight, and that just made me think of how, Department of Defense, they had 200 recognized faiths and denominations. They have dropped it to 31 from 200.
Yeah.
This week, last
Last week.
Yeah. And I don't think they're stopping there.
Yes.
No.
Well, the most interesting thing about that is, you realize they dropped the most popular Christian division, the Mormons. The Mormons aren't included.
You know how many they added?
Yeah.
They add better. I served as an intelligence.
Some are.
And Mormons are so into language and multilingualism and there were so many Mormons in the intelligence branches.
Really?
Yes.
What they said is they're not Christian, they don't say Christian.
I'm sure that was,
Yeah. I know they changed that, but that, yeah.
So what we're talking about is how this is all tied together. This is all tied together, being an ally. And what I would say is, part of also is, that's why we try to offer here many different ways of looking at all of this together, that it's not limited, this is not a one-issue church, which I love, I think because they're all tied together. They're all interrelated, interconnected, kind of thing.
Getting back to the idea that fear is somehow behind anti-gay feeling. I think there's, I think a perception, if the church is advocating simply the acceptance of marginalized people, that's one thing. I think some denominations are perceived as advocating, and I don't mean that as, I'm not even sure that's the right word to use, but sort of pushing that agenda.
Yeah.
And I think that those two things are received differently by the public at large. I think if you ask most people on the street, say, well, would you, what do you think about my cousin who's gay? Well, that's fine. Let him do what he wants to do. But if you say, well, what do you think about bringing, kind of gay books into elementary school, teaching kids about this other thing, most people probably would say, don't want it. I think there's a difference in acceptance and advocacy. They're not the same thing, and I think that's where part of the problem.
Thoughts? Go ahead.
That's ignorance. Kids, I'm not qualified to speak on that, that's my opinion.
What's that?
I'm not qualified to speak on children's sexuality. It's just being ignorant.
I have a question. So, are we okay with stories that show a mom and dad? Or stories where the characters get married in the end?
What's that?
Are we okay with stories that show a mom and dad?
Yeah.
I guess.
Okay, and we're okay with stories where men and women get married? Is that pushing an agenda, or is it just representation?
Well, some would say it's normal, right?
Yeah.
Right, it is. So having books that feature LGBTQIA characters doesn't push it. It's just a simple acknowledgement of its existence.
Right, exactly.
Right.
But it's perceived as pushing an
But I don't,
agenda.
what I'm saying is that I don't know that those things are perceived that way.
And that's what we have to have conversations
Yeah,
about.
that's
But just
exactly.
avoiding it is just perpetuating the cycle. And while the parents are the most important, having a single, warmly accepting adult figure in a child's life who is LGBTQIA drastically reduces their risk of self-harm.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think in a group like this, people who have some, background would be aware of it. I think in the larger population, sometimes these things are seen as pushing an agenda that the society as a whole is not ready for.
Well, that's why allyship is having these conversations
Yeah.
with those people
Exactly.
all the time.
That's part of
In
it.
front of kids, just that basic example. If this isn't pushing it, this isn't either. It's just what is.
Yeah.
And people, especially kids, don't know who it's safe to come out to. So when they hear you speak about this, being an ally is not just, well, they came out to me and I'm going to make sure you're safe. talking about it all the time and advocating in general, as it's for everyone, lets them know that you're a safe person. And it helps shift the conversation. The people that know you and love you and respect you that may not be caught up to the way things should be, having conversations with you is going to be a lot more effective than, oh, well, this person on TV is saying it and they're some radical whatever. And you go, no, nobody's putting litter boxes in schools. Okay? You know, it's really important.
Well, and those conversations help their peers accept as well and understand and be more accepting.
They may not accept it right away, but it plants a seed to go like, is it really pushing it, the fact that it's just there? If some kid at school happens to have 2 moms or 2 dads, just seeing a book where they go like, hey, that family looks like mine, it makes a massive difference. One of the books that was so objectionable, it was penguins, 2 penguins. And they have, it's famously 2 male penguins that adopted an abandoned chick and raised it. What? That's just a thing that happens. That chick wouldn't have survived on its own. It's a beautiful thing. Why is that objectionable for children? It's not.
Yeah, I think, you know, I live in a smaller community, but I think one of the things that's really important when you're talking about books and education, etc., is to be really aware of who's on the school boards, who's in your, you know, however your political community is set up, whether you've got town manager or, you know, select board or whatever, is to be really aware of who the people are that are running for these positions, because it's very easy for people to slide into those positions, and all of a sudden you have a, let's say, a progressive school board, and now you've got, you know, a couple of people that are creating a lot of contention on the board, and all the hard work that's been done by the board and the school can be quickly negated. So I think it's really important to be aware on a local level of the people that you're voting into office, you know, if you want to continue to have a progressive agenda, and especially in schools.
Exactly, yeah.
I think when organizing events, we were talking about the conference, and you brought up BSA in there,
Yes.
which is no longer BSA.
I know it's no longer BSA.
And I don't know what genius decided to go with the new name, because Scouting America, the new acronym, is SA, which is online shorthand for sexual assault.
Oh my gosh.
So that was real inclusive of all the
It's sort of
girls
like singing
joined.
the song at the end of
Yeah.
a confession.
It was.
Exactly.
So you've got to bring other people who are online. Who's the focus group? We need to have focus groups to run this by, and they need to be diverse.
Yes.
Because somebody would have called it out. I can't believe that nobody knew that that was the very common abbreviation.
And getting back to what you're all saying, that's why I think these conversations in a church setting are important, because part of being an ally is actually talking about these things and not avoiding these hard conversations. So there are so many churches that avoid these conversations. So you go back to this church choosing to vote to become a reconciling congregation. I was an associate pastor in Clifton Park at the time this church became a reconciling congregation. And Shenandoah went through the same process, and faithful study, all of it. And I would say would have voted to become a reconciling congregation. And what ended up happening was there was a minority in the church, talk about school board, that disrupted the entire church process a month before the vote. And he was a wonderful pastor, but he caved to that group. be caved to that group, so there was a non-vote to become a they pulled the vote, a non-vote to become a reconciling congregation at that time. I was being appointed there at the time of this non-vote, so they chose not to vote in May. I was coming in July. I was single. And the church was convinced that I was appointed there because I was gay. And it was the conference making a point.
Oh,
You know, and what ended up happening is, and this is the problem with not having honest conversations, and then went underground. And for my first 2 to 3 years, there were people who hated me for absolutely no reason.
No honeymoon stage?
What?
No honeymoon stage?
No, and there was no honeymoon stage.
Oh, poor Phil.
None. Because you know, again, he was a wonderful, gifted pastor, but he couldn't stand up to this group. And as a result, the church was in conflict from that point on.
Well, that's the problem with the church trying to meet everybody's needs.
Exactly. That's, yeah, exactly.
You know.
And I, you know, Sally's been part of congregations like this as well. You know, one of the conversations is why do you have to name it? Why do you have to
talk about it?
Why do we have to name who we include? And all means all. You know, we welcome all people. Why do you have to be specific? Being an ally means stating who's welcome.
All didn't always mean all.
Exactly. All
Black
different
Lives Matter. Remember, people were like, "Oh, Black Lives Matter. That's a bad statement. Let's just say all lives matter."
Yeah,
You
exactly.
missed the point.
And then you end up creating Blue Lives Matter.
Yeah.
It's just like, but again, Black Lives Matter was in response to brutality.
Of course.
What response to what was actually happening? Pride is a response to what is actually still happening. Stonewall is still happening. Look at Pulse.
Yeah, in a minute.
What's that? The nightclub. Look at Matthew Shepard. Look at, so when a church or a faith community chooses to make a stance of welcoming and radical welcome, a person walking in on well, first of all, there's whoever you are as a visitor, the first time you walk into a church, your first question is, am I going to be welcomed? Mm-hmm. People make up their minds in the first 5 minutes. People make up their mind walking in that door on Sunday morning whether they're going to come back or not. Even before a pastor preaches. But it's about belonging. And so, Black Lives Matter, Pride, LGBTQIA plus inclusivity, women, immigrants. This is all about, do I belong? That's the question, do I belong? And movements in the U.S. are all about expanding the welcome. It's the first time in U.S. history that we actually contracted the welcome. It's the first time in U.S. history. Now, we don't have a perfect system, and yes, there's been, but it's always been, if you think about our history, we've gone this way. What we're right now doing
Very long back.
or is this right? And that's going to be the question over the next elections. You know, that's going to be,
Phil, when you boil all this down, it's all about fear
yeah, it
and
is.
control. And, you know, in the military, I had some experiences. So I was an athlete and played mostly with a lot of black guys. And some of the Southern boys would come up to me and say, "Are you a nigger lover?" And that kind of thinking just never stopped. But that was the fear that something, I don't know why they were afraid, but I guess they would sing songs like "The South Shall Rise Again" over and over, and "In Your Face" if you were from the North,
Yep.
and those kind of things. But the upshot of that whole thing was, when I got onto another team, I guess they must have heard about it, the black guys. It made me a starter on the team. And I guess that really got people angry.
Yeah. Exactly.
But it is fear. That's the main issue that's going on.
It is.
Yeah, a few months ago, I saw a picture that reminded me of this with Mr. Rogers. Has the pool.
Yes, Francois Clemens.
Yes, Francois Clemens. And both had their feet in the pool. And that was so controversial in
Oh my gosh, yes.
1970s. You know, kind of thing. But that's, you know, that's, I think it's fear. And I think the conservative Christian movement that has embraced Christian nationalism in MAGA gets back to that the way to maintain control is through political power. Maintain control through political power.
Well, and who controls the money?
And who controls the money? Exactly. We mainliners don't control the money any longer. In fact, we don't have any money. But again, you know, the Turning Point USA and so forth, massive empires and massive political influence to maintain minority rule. To maintain minority rule. And that you know, and I think as Christians, those of us who believe in a wider community of belonging need to become allies. I can remember, what time is this? We're almost at the end of our time. We finished by 1:15. But I can remember sitting at the Interfaith Council after the first Trump, when Clinton lost Trump. And remember, there was the inauguration and then the Women's March. Yeah. And Mary Skilling? Yeah, she advocated that faith communities should be part of the Plattsburgh Women's March. And there were many at the Interfaith Council saying no. And so the Interfaith Council didn't choose to support it, but I went, and you know, another clergy went, but again, you know, but I chose to be a witness.
Everyone's so afraid to be political,
Yeah,
but, you know, they're conflating political and partisan.
yeah,
Because everything is political, and faith and church advocating for sharing and kindness, everything is political. Now, is it partisan? It shouldn't be,
no,
and it doesn't have to be.
Well, that's the thing that people are always saying, do politics out of the church. And that is the issue there.
yeah.
It's not about party, but people interpret it as being that way.
And so that was, you know, getting back to that statement that Plattsburgh chose to vote to become. Many, my guess is that there were some in the congregation that left. as a result. And probably was saying that the church shouldn't be political.
And when we put rainbow flags in the front yard,
Oh, yeah.
we lost more members
Well, yeah. And that was during my time.
because that was visible.
Yeah, go ahead.
The fact that you have rainbow flags in the front of your church is so powerful.
It's a statement.
Regardless of regardless of whether or not an LGBTQ plus person steps foot in this church, they drive past that and they see that that's powerful.
Yeah.
It's analogous to having GSAs in schools. Kids tell us whether or not they participate in the GSAs, the fact that they're there is so supportive for them. So, and I get thanked for hanging the rainbow flag on my house. That's a simple thing, to put a rainbow flag on my house, and people thank me for doing that. So I just wanted to say that it's a powerful thing that you're doing for the LGBT community just by having that in the front of your church, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
We moved here 11 years ago, and those rainbow flags are one of the biggest reasons why we came here. Because it's not just about that,
No.
but it's a litmus test. So that's where you know if you're safe, if you're LGBTQIA, if you're a woman, if you're a minority, if you're any kind of other. If they are brave enough to put that out there, it's welcoming for everyone, not just the people there. And that's allyship too.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And our first flags were the rainbow flags. These flags also have the trans symbol, intersection as well. So, we're growing in our
We
understanding.
have a question of what GSA is.
Yes.
Gay Straight Alliance.
Oh,
Oh, thank you.
I just didn't
I'm
think
like
of
Girl Scouts of America.
It is 1:15. Does it say one more time?
I just wanted to say that, never mind.
This has been awesome. We're going to take July and August off, except for the picnic at the Lackeys, and we're going to help Rick and Cynthia out with that as we go, and that'll get out through Diane. And then we'll regroup again the second Thursday of every month, beginning in September. I'm not going to think about topics until then, but if you do have an idea for future topics, by all means, email me. By all means, if there's something you would love to see happen in this context, by all means, email me. I mean, we're heading into the midterms this fall, which is going to be an important time. I think the next couple of elections are going to really determine where we're headed. But I also feel strongly that just replacing a president isn't. We have a lot more work to do.
That's the beginning.
Is there a No Kings thing coming up?
There is. It's in conjunction with his 80th birthday.
And they
So that
let me
was
fight
sweet.
and stuff.
Yeah. I don't have the Indivisible. If you look up Indivisible or No Kings, it might be on there.
It's not an event.
It's not here.
It's not.
There's no march or anything happening in this community.
Not in this community.
But there is elsewhere. There is elsewhere.
Yeah, all over everywhere.
Again, thank you all for those who provide meals and dessert and refreshments and cleanup and setup. Really appreciate all of you. Have a great day.
Thank you for dying.